All right, good evening, everyone and anyone. Like to call the December 6, 2021 Planning Commission meeting to order at 6 p.m. Will you please call the roll?
Acting Chair Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Here.
Commissioner Brooks? Here. Commissioner Connolly?
Yes. Here.
Commissioner Mager? Commissioner Lasso? Here. And Chairman Mike Noble.
All right, looks like we do have a quorum present, so we'll proceed. Any public comment on anything in general? We will limit public comments to 3 minutes per speaker, please. You will have an opportunity to speak on a matter at hand as it comes up.
Hello, my name is Jean Farnan. I live at 574 Johns Pass Avenue. And since this is our planning commission and you're looking at some more planned developments, I'd really like to bring to your attention what we have going on at the entrance of the city, where it looks like bombed out Beirut with the ripped up awnings, and then you have a gravel parking area with all kinds of weeds, and the construction area doesn't look too good. And I would hope that somebody would enforce that. I can't imagine anybody else getting away with that, and it's been like that for months. So I just thought I'd bring that to your attention since you are the people that decide on these projects.
Thank you very much. Anyone else under the general comment section?
Hello, my name is Dustin O'Neill. I'm the owner of Sunshine Scenic Tours. Well, part owner. My wife over there, Renee O'Neill, she's the other half, better half. I just wanted to bring up, I have a lot of friends in the restaurant industry, and as you all know, last year was very tough for all of us. Tourism in Johns Pass and Madeira Beach is huge for our economy. Obviously, we were hit pretty hard by the COVID strain that came through and the shutdowns. A lot of the restaurants at that time were allowed to put tables outside, and I would like to advocate for them to be able to continue to do that, especially now that we face a possible new strain coming in that could result in another shutdown for businesses in the area. So if there was any way that we could get something in writing that would say the restaurants in Madeira Beach would be able to extend their ability to keep their tables and stuff outside. I, for one, really enjoy sitting outside, especially on a cool night like tonight. I'm sure there's other people here that enjoy that as well, and I don't see any reason that would cause any problems. I don't see any problems that I've had in the past at eating at these restaurants. Like I said, I have some friends in the restaurant industry. I'm just speaking on their behalf for them. So hopefully we can work something out where we get something in writing there. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for any more general comments? All right. In that case, we'll look to have someone make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from September 13th, which was our last meeting. Anyone like to make a motion or amendment to any of those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Please call the roll for the vote.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly? Yes. Commissioner Latzo? Yes. And Acting Chair Wyckoff?
Yes.
Thank you. It's 5-0.
Okay, motion passes. The minutes are accepted. So now I'm moving on under new business. The first item under new business is the Planning Commission elections.
Mr. Chair, yes, you have every year have an election cycle, and you have to elect a chair, a vice chair, and a second vice chair.
Okay, perfect. Is this something you feel we should postpone until we have a full body among us?
technically, you were supposed to have done it in October. We've been
Perfect.
waiting for a full body for some months.
Okay.
And at
Well, there
this
you go.
point, you need to just go ahead and
Okay, I know I'm
take care of it.
full-bodied myself, but we'll do the best that we can with the situation. Okay, well, I'll take any nominations from the floor. I guess we should start with chairperson. Anybody have any nominations for chairperson?
I'd like to nominate Michael Wyckoff as chair.
Okay, thank you. Any more nominations for that? Not looking good for me. Okay. Okay.
We need a second to that nomination.
Does anybody second that nomination?
I'll second that nomination.
Can't see, I didn't see that coming. Okay, great, thank you. If there are any more nominations for chairperson, I suppose then that settles that, or we need to call for a vote,
You
please.
need a
We'll
vote.
call for a vote for the position of chairperson for myself. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Latzo?
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly? Do you get to vote for yourself?
He has to vote for someone, yeah.
Sure, might as well. I'm going to lose either way, right? I mean, win, not lose. I'll be on the wrong side of the vote if I go the other way. So, yes, thank you. Thank you, folks. And now we need a nomination for a vice chairperson, first vice chair. Anyone? Am I allowed to make nominations as the chairperson?
Yeah. Yes.
I would like to nominate Mr. Kerr.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a nomination and a second, or any other nominations for first vice chair? Seeing none, I would suppose that nomination to be closed, and we can take the vote for first vice chair for Mr. Kerr.
Acting Chair Wyckoff, or will be chair, I guess? Wyckoff?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Lasso?
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly? Yes. Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Okay, one more position to fill, second vice chair. So we will take nominations for the second vice chair if anyone has one, please. Anyone?
I would like to nominate Anne Marie Brooks.
And then I'll second that if I'm permitted to do so as a chairperson.
Okay.
Any more nominations for second vice chair? Seeing that there wasn't a fight for the first round, I'll call nominations to be closed, and please call the vote.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Acting Chair Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Latzo? Yes. Commissioner Connolly? Yes. Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could remind the newer members that you need to push your microphone,
yeah.
Otherwise we don't actually pick up a recording of your sound at all, surprisingly.
Okay, thanks for the reminder. Okay, so moving on to item B under new business, RDV 2021-01 Schooner redevelopment. First step will be our redevelopment staff report.
Actually, the first step, according to your rules, is that the presentation is made by the petitioner.
Well, there you go. I sit corrected.
And Mr. Chairman, I need to go ahead and swear in all the witnesses. This is a quasi-judicial hearing,
please,
so I need
thank
to
you.
make sure that everybody is sworn in. Anyone that's going to speak tonight, if you could please stand up, raise your right hand, and be sworn under oath. Anyone that's going to speak. On any of these items on this agenda item. You swear the testimony you're about to give is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I got most of the audible sound there.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd remind the board, again, my name is Tom Trask. I'm the city attorney. I know that you normally have one of my associates cover the meeting, but since this is kind of a bigger project, I wanted to be present here tonight. And I'm going to try to guide you through the process. Not that you don't really I don't think you really need it, but I just wanted to remind you of some of the code provisions so that we don't have an issue of appeal later on. Under your code section 2-9, which requires this causational hearing, there is a process that we need to go through. One of the processes, first of all, to establish whether or not that there is any ex parte communications by any of you with anyone about this project outside of this meeting. So if there have been any ex parte contacts, you should disclose them today. Tell us who you spoke to and what the substance of the conversation was. Have any of you spoke to anyone about this project? And if so, we can start and go this direction. Mr. Kerr?
No.
Okay. Ms. Brooks? No. Mr. Latzo?
No.
Mr. Wyckoff?
No.
Mr. Connolly?
No.
Okay. Now we're past that. Very good. Thank you. So next, I need to basically give you a summary of the application. You remember that in section 2-8, it requires me to do this, to give a very, very brief summary of the application before you, and then we're going to head on to the rest of the project presentation. So first of all, as you know, in reading the packet information that you have, this is to demolish a 31-unit hotel building, to redevelop those 31 existing lodging units into 31 units plus an additional 22 for a total of 53-unit hotel, along with 3 condo units, a restaurant, ground floor retail, structured parking, preservation, and open space. The code also requires me to tell you that the standards to be applied are those standards set forth in both 2 sections, 110-97 dealing with redevelopment and 110-391 dealing with the PD. The burden of proof under your code is that you need to determine what the greater weight of the evidence is, that the application is consistent with the comp plan and complies with all procedural requirements of the law, including the criteria set forth in those code sections that I mentioned to you before. Your code also provides then that the first party to make its presentation would be the applicant. The second party would be the city, and normally if there are affected parties, that would be the third individual or individuals. We don't have any notices of intent to become affected parties for this hearing, so that you're just going to hear from the applicant, their witnesses, the city, and the city's witnesses before you take it under consideration. I'm here to answer questions as we go through the process if you have any, but I'm just going to hand over the floor to Ms. Cole. She is the attorney representing the developer, and it's back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Appreciate that. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairperson, members of the board. Katie Cole with the law firm of Hill, Ward, Henderson, representing the applicant, JBB Schooner, regarding the Schooner redevelopment. As a matter of procedure, I did want to ask, Mr. Chair, there are 2 items on the agenda tonight, the recommendation regarding the redevelopment plan, as well as a recommendation regarding the planned redevelopment rezoning. In an interest of time and convenience, if it would be acceptable, we'd like to give a presentation that covers both applications, understanding that when it's time for discussion and vote, those discussions and votes would be bifurcated to the 2 agenda items.
Fundamentally, I have no problem with that, Mr. Trask. Do you see any issues with that?
No, and I think that, frankly, that would be the easiest thing to do, so you won't have people up and down all night long.
Yeah, double duty.
Save some time.
Appreciate that. Okay, very well. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. As you know in your staff report, this is a redevelopment plan approval and a PD rezoning, and this is the probably 3rd or 4th time this board has seen a project on this site. But in the summer, the site was approved for a PD rezoning in July, and it approved several parcels to provide for a 56-room, 9-story hotel with rooftop bar and accessory meeting rooms, restaurants, with the parking garage on the east side. There was a legal challenge regarding the effectiveness of that planned development rezoning, and so the applicant has made a new application that will serve to either amend the previously approved rezoning or create a new PD on this property, depending how the legal challenge went. But in essence, your action tonight will supersede any action that was taken or would make a recommendation for the commission to supersede any action that was taken in July. The development agreement that would be a companion based on the PD zoning district is not before you tonight. It will be before you in January. We wanted to take our time with that agreement. There have been comments and conditions that have come out of the staff review. We're confident you all may have comments and conditions that you would like to see incorporated into that agreement. And so we wanted to take the opportunity to incorporate those items and work with Mr. Trask and the staff on the development agreement and bring that back to you in January for the LPA's recommendation and first hearing that would then go to the City Commission in January as well. So that's why you don't have a development agreement on your agenda. So there are 3 new applications, 2 of which, as you know, are on your agenda tonight. The plan development with concept plan and changed conditions from the prior approval, a redevelopment plan approval, which you did not see at the last hearing, and density. Both of these applications rely upon the code's provisions for density and intensity averaging. The density and intensity averaging request is an administrative approval, but I wanted to highlight that it's actually a separate provision of your code. There are criteria associated with it. The applicant has made that request of the staff, and they have reviewed it in conjunction with this application. So in the redevelopment plan, and the plan development, you'll see on the west side of Gulf Boulevard in the plans that you should have in your packet is a 53-room hotel and 3 condominium units, second floor and rooftop restaurant and resort services, surface parking under the building, and the parking deck across the street with minor retail space. There's also open space included as a buffer between the proposed garage deck and the neighborhood to the east. There's a crosswalk provided between the 2 parcels pursuant to DOT standards. Improvements to 145th and 146th Avenue, including sidewalk, landscaping, and repaving on the portion that is adjacent to the property. And the public park is proposed to the east of the parking deck. These are revised renderings of the exterior of the property. The height at 8 stories, which is 7 stories with plus the rooftop. So it's a garage, and then the hotel, and then the rooftop. This is a rendering of the parking deck looking east from Gulf Boulevard toward the parking deck, with approximately 3,450 square feet of retail space. One of the criteria of a planned development is to provide additional public benefit. And so the retail space is something that was specifically requested by staff to create a pedestrian environment along Gulf Boulevard that the applicant was happy to provide, in addition to the street improvements and crosswalk park. This is the front elevation showing the height. It's 105 feet from grade. Your code actually measures height from your base flood elevation, but we thought it was the most fair representation for the community to see what the at-grade height was, so there was not any confusion. So this is approximately 15 to 18 feet shorter than what the last presentation was. This is your site plan on the ground floor of the hotel. There were some comments about a loading zone made previously. And so working with the staff and DOT, there's provided access points to ensure that there's clear loading zone. And here's the ground floor of the parking deck with retail. And you can see on the east side the open space park area provided there, as well as the stormwater pond on 145th. The rooftop amenity deck at the hotel is provided. There are conditions of approval as reflected in the staff report with respect to the noise on the rooftop. And the development agreement as proposed that you'll see next month would propose to memorialize those restrictions in a separate covenant so they would be enforceable against the owner of the property. There was a lot of discussion about the height of the property, and so this exhibit just shows the other towers that are in the vicinity here that are of similar height and scope of the planned development. One of the criteria of the planned development approvals is the height should be consistent with other properties of the same zoning district in the area. The redevelopment plan approval vests existing development rights from the property and allows for the redevelopment of the property. In this case, the 31 units from the west side of Gulf Boulevard are existing pursuant to the business tax receipts and the prior approvals of the existing Schooner Resort. So it's proposed that those 31 units be redeveloped. There are 11 existing units on the east side, but rather than vesting those, the applicant proposes to take the 25 units from the east side of the property that are generated through the 45 units per acre and use density averaging to average those units and use them on the new parcel. The 3 existing residential units on the far east parcel, where the proposed park is located, are proposed to also come over to the west side. So all of the residential and transient use from these parcels will move to the west of Gulf Boulevard and be included in the one building. The preliminary site plan has been reviewed by staff, and the redevelopment plan must be approved by the commission pursuant to your code. For the planned development rezoning, the purpose of the PD is well-designed projects, design, imaginative, and functional, containing a mix of uses, ensuring compatibility with the community. And that's exactly what's been proposed in front of you with the plans. There's no change of use or designation requested. It's a tourist-oriented use consistent with your land development code and the comprehensive plan, which specifically calls out for tourism-related uses along Gulf Boulevard. The non-resident land use activity is limited in FAR, and the residents and transient accommodations comprise, the majority of the FAR, almost exclusively, with the exception of the 3,500 square feet of retail on the east and the use of the bar and the restaurants on the hotel. The east side is currently in use as retail, residential, and vacant, and it's proposed to be, I'm sorry, that's a mistake, and it's proposed to be retail and structured parking there, which are approved and allowed uses in the zoning district there. The site is contiguous. It's separated by the right-of-way, but under the code that maintains contiguity per your definitions. And the floor area and density are calculated as a whole through density and intensity averaging, which is permitted by both the countywide rules and your code. It continues to be consistent with the comprehensive plan objectives regarding mobility and allowing the parking garage and limited movement. It's Robert Pergolesi, who is a transportation planner with Gulf Coast Consulting, is here, and he'll speak specifically to the traffic and parking available here. The land uses are compatible in density and the increased building height. The PD is required to approach the land use intention of the land use categories. Because the zoning codes severely limit the building heights, the PD is provided to aggregate the properties and allow for a higher intensity of use or actual height on the site, and then therefore we're lowering the height on the east side of Gulf Boulevard. It's the only method of allowed to aggregate these. There's not a plan development site plan aggregation opportunity. This is the path to provide for these aggregated sites. It'll further the public interest by redeveloping antiquated and vacant property, promoting infill development, promoting mixed-use, accessible, and pedestrian-supportive development types, reducing automobile traffic, providing valet parking for hotel guests, improving the facilities generally with environmental aspects, enhancing the value of the property and the surrounding properties, providing ground level retail and pedestrian access, Beach accessibility is adjacent to and in support of the public park next door, and neighborhood benefits with the streetscape and open space improvements. With that, I'll ask Mr. Pergolesi to please come forward, and he will review the traffic analysis that supports this plan. I think you have 2 slides, maybe.
Oh, really?
It might just be this one.
Good evening. My name is Robert Pergolesi. I'm a transportation planner, AICP certified planner, and a principal with Gulf Coast Consulting, 13825 ICOT Boulevard, Suite 605 in Clearwater. I provided a traffic assessment letter that was submitted to the city in early November for the 53-room hotel, the 3,450 square feet of retail on the east side, and 3 multifamily units. Based on ITE Trip Generation 11th edition rates, which are brand new, they just came out in September. They update them every few years. This project would generate 632 daily trips, 57 PM peak hour trips. Based on Forward Pinellas level of service report, which is produced every year by Forward Pinellas, a county transportation planning agency, Gulf Boulevard, a 4-lane divided arterial, operates at level of service D and has a volume to capacity ratio of 0.543. With the impacts of this project, that volume to capacity ratio would increase to 0.558, a minor increase. Level of service D operations would still be maintained. Basically, the 0.54, it's about 50%. This roadway is operating at about half of its capacity. There are multiple benefits and significant public benefits to the redevelopment of this property. Consolidation of multiple access points into one driveway to conform with FDOT policies. If you've been out there, you notice that there's back out parking into Gulf Boulevard, which the DOT hates. Sometimes people back in so they can pull out in a forward motion. So then they're stopping on Gulf Boulevard and backing into their spaces. We've discussed that with FDOT as well. So it eliminates the current problem that back in, back out parking, sort of free for all. Creates new and improved parking on the east side of Gulf Boulevard, removes a lot of broken asphalt and shell, replaces it with paved parking with access to 146th Avenue only. New sidewalks on both 145th Avenue and 146th Avenue, and provides a new pedestrian crosswalk in conformance with FDOT policies to enhance pedestrian safety. Based on the city's code, a detailed traffic analysis is not required per the mobility management ordinance because of the level of service D operations on Gulf Boulevard and the minimal traffic impact. A detailed traffic study would be required by FDOT if and when we get to the permitting stage, so that will ultimately need to be done. And finally, there's significant public benefits to this redevelopment. I know that there was another slide here. There you go. I was reading off my notes. I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding that, and Katie will sum up.
I know, it's hard to read. Our presentation's a little dry because we got caught off guard having to go first and go through all the details, so bear with us here. So with that, the traffic analysis, I think it's important to note that we have met with FDOT to discuss the design and the crosswalk, and they are supportive, and Mr. Pergolesi is working on that permitting and such as well. So we have had those discussions based on the request of staff. So in conclusion, we'll reserve any extra time for comments and questions, but I didn't go sheet by sheet through the plans. I know you all have those in front of them. I know you may have more questions for staff and then want to ask us questions otherwise, because I don't want to be in the position of necessarily interpreting your code. I think staff would be better to do that. So with that, we would conclude and ask for your respectful recommendation of approval. I think through the application that's been presented, one more business item. We would like to include the presentation, the application, the staff report, all into evidence and incorporate those into evidence tonight. And if we could do that, we would appreciate that, together with the testimony you've received. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
that you shook your head yes, but for the purposes of the record, you're accepting those things into evidence then? Okay, thank you.
Yes, be glad to accept those into evidence. Thank you.
Thanks.
Keep forgetting they can't hear, shaking my head, sorry. Thank you. At this point, do we have any questions we'd like to ask from the board? Okay, Ms. Brooks?
So you mentioned valet, and when I read through our packet, I thought that I read that valet was not 100% right now. So has that decision been made?
It's an operational decision. We did not design the garage on either side to require valet. If a garage is designed to require valet or if valet is required, there's the opportunity to have double stacked or tandem spaces, and the garage is not designed accordingly. Operationally, it's most likely that the operator will valet park simply because of the ease to do it, depending on the time of day and such.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Mr. Kerr?
I have some questions. The density of the properties, the contiguous property, that has not been raised in an aggregate. Is that correct? Beyond, if the west side had 31, I don't remember the numbers, and the east side had the balance, we haven't asked for a variance to increase density overall.
Correct.
For the west side property.
Correct. There is no variance requested for density. The density and intensity as proposed is consistent with the underlying land use categories, which is what is required by the planned development category.
Okay. The properties are deeded separately currently. Will this be a one deed after this is all complete?
I think that ownership, without specifying the ownership, the property will be joined together as a zoning parcel. And so even if there were different owners associated, and I don't know if there will or won't be, it just is somewhat irrelevant to answer your question. Even if there are different owners, this will always be carried together as a planned development and always be tied together through, in essence, a unity of title, which I'll make a note would be a good thing to add to the development agreement.
So down in the future, 20 years from now, somebody can't decide to demolish that parking garage and retail space and build condominium.
Under the code, and I'll let, when Ms. Portal has the opportunity to speak, she can speak to this more specifically. Under your code, I would think that would be unlikely because this is a planned development, and the density and intensity averaging portion of your code, in essence, strips those entitlements from the other parcels and puts them in one place. And so once all of those entitlements are utilized on the west side of the parcel, there wouldn't be any units left on the east side.
Okay.
Unless you had a significant change to your comprehensive plan.
Okay,
I guess that would be my caveat.
It's documented or if it needs to be documented, that's all. I know there a lot of design went into this plan, but I'm curious to know, so we'll have a 3-story structure on the east side, and we'll have a 7-story plus rooftop on the west side. If this was not approved and you had to go back to the drawing board and build a parking garage underneath of residential on both sides per what that density is for those individual lots, does anyone have an idea what that would look like? I mean, I bring that up because, you know, the biggest complaint is the height of the 7-story structure. I'm just trying to get an idea. Would it be 5 on each side regardless because that's approved by the plan? Or is this balance, you know, you're offsetting one for the other, you're still going to have the same amount of blue sky from the street, I'm sure that if I'm not asking that question, it's just a question I think everyone would appreciate an understanding of.
Certainly. So under the code, there's a maximum height for each zoning district, and so it would depend if it's redeveloped as a planned development, rezoning amendment to a planned development, which allows for some greater height versus what would otherwise be permitted under the by right zoning district. From my experience in looking at designs, clearly having to accommodate parking on the first several floors of a building increases the height dramatically.
No, I understand that. I just don't know if that exercise was gone through this has been in planning for years.
It has been.
And I didn't know if anyone on your team actually know the answer to that, or if it...
I don't think, unless Mr. Bowden would like to respond, I don't think that it has ever been looked at specifically because the intention is to provide more intensity of uses on west of Gulf Boulevard and reduce the intensity on east. And that's called out through your comprehensive plan, and it's called out through the planning documents. And so by virtue, you've said it correctly, by virtue, you're taking away the higher, more intense development on the east that's closer to the neighborhood and putting it on the west, and allowing that to go up a couple stories extra accommodates that opportunity.
Okay. And the parking, you addressed the parking. The last time we were together, I believe we talked about either retail or a retail front on the parking garage, not necessarily retail. I think that was up in the air, whether it would actually be retail or just not look like a parking garage from the Gulf side. Now that the retail has been added to the parking structure, does the demand for parking in the parking garage, and if so, are we still within zoning?
The parking garage is designed with actual retail use along Gulf Boulevard. It actually always has been actual retail use, but it's been a reduced amount. It's now at 3,450 square feet, and the parking calculations do accommodate parking for that retail use specifically, in addition to the residential and transient accommodations use.
Okay.
So the parking calculations that are included in the site data table on sheet 1, ASP 1, incorporate each of those uses.
Okay. And then lastly, I think all of the Madeira Beach parking areas for residents is free of charge to be able to use those. Is that the plan for this parking, or is this totally separate, private? And
this is a private parking garage that's required parking for the uses proposed. There is not additional public parking proposed or provided. Without speaking for Mr. Bowden, I would imagine if the hotel was not booked, or if it became obvious that, as is expected, over 20%, I think you said, 20% of their customers currently arrive by Uber or cab or without cars. If it became obvious that there were available parking spaces on a regular basis, would they open the garage to the public? I'm sure they could if the city would allow it, but it's not anything that's contemplated today.
Okay. Well, I can't imagine that there would be a strong requirement for residents, but there are times when poor weather is coming in the area that people want to get cars off the street. They want to get them out of their garages, and they're looking for elevated locations to be able to park those. And it may be a day, maybe 2 days, maybe a few days. I don't know.
So you're thinking more in the case of an emergency?
Well, I'm just finding out where the mindset is, and if I'm looking to add value to the residents of Madeira Beach.
We can certainly consider that, and in the confines of the development agreement, we can talk through what that might look like. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, may I?
Mr. Conley, can you bring your microphone in front of you so we can hear you? Can you move the
Drag it over.
microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Good. Okay.
thank you.
In your opening, you basically said that this unit would be 8 stories with a finished 9. Can you clarify that? Is that 9 stories finished? Because you have a cupola on top? Is that what you're basically?
Correct.
Okay.
It's 8. It's 7 with the 8.
Because you said 8 plus 9, because I wrote it right down when you said it.
The prior approved,
Okay,
sorry.
that's not a problem.
If I misspoke.
Your height per floor is what? Resident height,
I'll have.
room height?
I'll-
Is it
I'll
8
need to
foot?
have-
Is it 10 foot? Is
I'll-
it 9 foot?
I'll need to have Mr. Bodziak speak to the height.
Excuse me?
The architect,
10.8. That's about a 9-foot ceiling. Okay, so,
We can't have.
we can't have him speak, so we'll have to have him come up. But Mr. Bodziak, the architect, just explained that it's about a 9-foot ceiling and it's floor to floor of
9-foot
10.8.
ceiling and finished
10.8.
floor, you've got
Mhm.
so much flooring and so much ceiling height, you're basically probably coming in at 11, 12 foot. So in other words.
10.8. It's 10.8, according to the plans.
10.8 finished.
Yep.
Can't be.
Floor to floor. Floor to floor.
9 finished inside.
Mm-hmm.
10.8? Okay. So we'll say basically 11. You're still coming in at almost 100 feet high. That's a very tall building.
To the
For
tip
Madeira
of the,
Beach, that is an extremely tall building.
that is
And
to
then
the,
you're putting the cupolas on top.
no, the 100 feet height is to the very tip of the cupola. If you look on, I can go back, but on,
See, I don't have any of this. I'm new, so I'm sorry for,
oh, do you not have
I have none of your specs.
oh,
I have,
okay, well, here.
so
let me-
I'm kind of like lost here.
Well, you are lost, and let me help you be unlost, because we absolutely need our board members to have copies of plans.
Okay. So let me ask you, so I'm not going to go through this because I won't get some questions. Thank you. I appreciate that. Wonderful. My next question is, what is your height in your garage per floor?
I'll need Mr. Bodziak to respond to these details. But base flood is 11.8 plus 3 feet or 4 feet of freeboard. 4 feet of freeboard. So design flood elevation is 4.
And you're making this 4 stories, 4 floors?
Of garage?
Yes.
No,
Your elevated garage?
on the east side.
Right.
Sorry. I didn't know which you were talking about. Yes, let me. There you go. 3 stories. Ground floor
Gotcha.
plus 2.
And nothing on the top?
Parking.
On the top floor?
Uh-huh.
On a roof? So it's
Yes,
4?
parking on the roof deck. 1, 2, 3, 4 parking decks.
Right.
The ground floor,
Yeah,
2 stories, parking on the rooftop.
correct.
Now you have my plans, so I can't look at each sheet, sorry.
My last comment, if you put in valet parking, you'd be the only person in Madeira Beach with that. And I think you'd turn it into Miami.
No, they have it at Caddy's as well. Caddy's.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah,
Don't compare that.
thank you.
So, okay, any more?
And I'm just looking to be confirmed, we are parking on the roof of the parking deck. according to the architect, parking would be on the roof deck.
Okay, confirmation of that. Thank you. Okay, do we have any more questions of our applicant? Anyone? Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Be staff presentation next.
Yep, staff presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The staff's presentation is broken into two parts because we had two different issues to address. One is the redevelopment, and the other is the plan development. And we can run those presentations back to back to make them similar to what you just heard from the petitioner, and then have you ask all the questions at once, or we can take questions after the first presentation. It's up to you.
I'm okay with running them together, but I'd like to ask the board if they're okay with that. Okay with running them simultaneously, running the whole thing through?
All right.
Okay, very well.
So,
Linda, can you introduce yourself, please, and
sure.
your experience?
All right. My name is Linda Portal. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Madeira Beach. I have been in urban planning and government administration for program development in the state of Florida for over 35 years. I have served as Community Development Director at City of Gainesville, Planning Manager, also at Gainesville, the head of the local government growth management and planning operations for the Regional Planning Council here in Tampa Bay. And I also had a private practice planning business, working on the private sector for large developments of a DRI type developments, and also writing comprehensive plans, rewriting land development codes, and also working with nonprofits such as school boards and library districts in order to prepare their strategic and their long-range property development plans. I've been here for 4 years.
Thank you.
Right, so the redevelopment application. And the reason this is coming to you in a little bit different order than last time, we thought we'd come back with the redevelopment after at least the zoning was established as a broad base, but we decided we better look at the redevelopment first, since what's being proposed is in the zoning is to use the density or intensity that's already existing on a couple of the properties. So this time around, we decided it'd be better to do everything all together, in particular to look at the redevelopment. And this is just a map showing the location. Most of you know where the Schooner is. We've talked about this quite a bit. The property on the west side is between 145th and 146th Avenues. And in this particular slide, I want to show you that when we got the application in this time, the legal description for Lot 3, which is the long lot that goes down to the water, included that preservation area on the beach. However, the property appraiser does not recognize that legal description, and it takes quite a while for that kind of application to extend your lot lines, to go through the state's procedures, and barring there be any official documents that have been obtained or resolved, we'd ask them please to take that portion of the property out of the map. And so we are looking at these areas for redevelopment. On the west side is the one redevelopment lot that has a triplex. On the east side are the lots that contain the condominium units and the hotel units for the Schooner development. Now, the purpose in redevelopment is that to establish or encourage actually people to bring their properties into compliance with current code for both building and for zoning as much as possible, in particular with concerns towards floodplain management and life safety and property risk. And in order to do that, they must, of course, be legally non-conforming. So they've got more units than would be allowed by current regulation, but it was legal when it was built initially. That's the case for all of the lots that are requesting changed now. The residential lot on the west side has the duplexes and, east side, the duplex and triplex on the non-conforming lot. It has a triplex right now. And using an existing code, it would be impossible to get that density back without a redevelopment process. Anything that's redeveloped does have to meet when it comes back in, the structure has to meet the front setback, height, parking requirement, floodplain regulations that are in place at the time of the request. So many of the things would be brought up to code. It was just that they were allowed the same intensity that they used to have. The multifamily side on the west side, which has the Schooner development right now, has to adhere to the regulations for multifamily hotel, motel, motor lodge, and multifamily hotel, motel, motor lodges. May be rebuilt to the same density, height, and side setbacks, but must comply with front setback, the county coastal construction control, the floodplain regulations, fire code, and parking, of course, and anything that's contained within their certificate of occupancy and any other requirements effective at the time for building. So they have to be compliant with building code. Normally, when you do a redevelopment plan, you bring in some kind of site plan. It's usually conceptual and some kind of idea of what you would be building. So what they've included in their application is basically the 2 site plans for each side of the Schooner development. We'll go into more detail on that when we talk a few minutes from now about the PD. And so I know that you're familiar with these. One side this is the east side having the retail up front, and then parking behind on the ground and parking above on the levels above it. And then on the west side, the hotel, with parking on the ground floor and activities on the roof. I can't read that far away there. So, currently, the triplex, or the 3-unit condo, and then the 31, on the one side, and then the 31 temporary lodging units that are currently on the Schooner side, on the west side, will all comply with the coastal construction control line, the setback, the parking, the fire codes, and the floodplain regulations. The plan indicates that the base flood elevation and freeboard requirements are consistent with code, and that it shows that the buildings will not extend across the CCCL. That the site plan was proposed rezoning to the plan development will obviously go through the full PD process. And also, after the process is done, they have to come back for a site plan approval in greater detail. And at that point, we'll have to have another public hearing and give the community opportunity to come in and talk about specifics of access and the real more detailed building access points. At that point also, we have the opportunity to get more input from the state. Whenever we're looking at these kind of developments, we cannot require them to go out and get permits from FDOT or the Water Management District or anybody ahead of the zoning, because by law, they are not allowed to do that. So we have to put the zoning in place, and then before we give them the site plan is the point at which we require them to get those permits. So there is another layer of development review with this process. So the redevelopment in the comprehensive plan is contemplated under policy 1.92. The intent is to encourage those areas in those areas zoned for R1 and R2 where the existing density exceeds that permitted by the future land use map to redevelop. And also that the city encourages the tourist-related development and redevelopment to reflect the beach community character of the city. Those are just to give you an idea what the policies are then. Not done with that. So under the planning, the PD for the Schooner site, now some of you, well, Mr. Wyckoff, Mr. Kerr, and you've been through this once before. I know with the Schooner, and if you'd been involved with us any longer, you'd have been through it twice before, because we've been through this entire process twice here at the Planning Commission level. And so we've been talking a lot. And Mr. Kerr, actually, there were times when they talked about initially having more of the units, the hotel units on the other side. It made for a taller building, of course, in order to get all the parking in on that side, and that puts a lot more intensity on the west side, closer to the residential. It also involves more of the people in the hotel units walking back and forth between the beach and the hotel room. So we talked a lot about trying to get the units over on the west side, specifically to keep people from up the road who are just going back and forth to the beach, staying at the hotel. So it has come in several different iterations over time. And we've looked at location. I've explained this about the zoning codes we've provided in the package. You can see that what the original zoning was, and that they were rezoned to PD this summer, and what's being proposed is a different PD, effectively, than what is approved last time. And these are the areas that are actually affected by the PD. You can see we've taken out the area that was designated on the beach, which the most recent public document we have on that labels it as public beach. These are the areas with their zoning, the way they currently stand. We have the R3 on the beach side, C3 in the red along the east side of Gulf, and then the one R2 unit in the gold there that will be used for open space. Now, the purpose of a planned development is, well, there are several purposes. The idea is to encourage the local government, or the local government to encourage the development community to come up with something that's more unique, to be able to be more flexible than this standard zoning in exchange for some particular benefits to the community. And this is a vehicle that's used all over the country in planning as a way to get those unique, creative developments put together, things that just don't quite fit in with standard zoning, which is sometimes very, very strict. In our case, in Madeira Beach, almost everything that comes in for commercial is proposed as a PD because our height restriction is so low that for the most part, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to even get financing for new construction. We even have districts that up until recently, for instance, Johns Pass was designated for only single-story development along the pass, which is not, we can't even do. And so in order to get your investment back out, or to get any financing for anything, you've got to be able to get some kind of use back out of the property. And that's very difficult in a beach community in particular, because you can't use the ground without a lot of investment or expensive type development. So we see a lot of that to just accommodate one or two extra floors. The purpose then is to accommodate and integrate well-designed developments, to associate zoning with specific plans and projects. Typically, if you're changing the zoning and it's from one standard zoning to another, you don't require any kind of development. You know, you come with site plan separately, but with a PD, you can ask for a great deal more detail than you would be getting out of standard zoning. And what you're doing is creating the land development code that goes with that zoning and attaching it to the property, the use of the property, instead of waiting for it to come back separately as a site plan. It provides the flexibility in design, encourages imaginative approaches for design. It assures development that's functional, high quality, compatible with adjacent areas and nearby land activities. Furthers planning goals of the community, that's very important too, and encourages a mix of uses. Now, PD requires a neighborhood meeting. There have been multiple neighborhood meetings on the Schooner over the years. But when they decided to come back, even though they had one approved in the summer, they decided to come back with a new application we said, yes, you're going to need another neighborhood meeting, and so they scheduled one, and it was conducted on the 3rd of November. All of those meetings submit a video and transcripts, and those are posted online. They have been accessible for review. What's really important in a neighborhood meeting is that any assurances that the developer makes to people attending the meeting about a specific design change or any kind of concession specific to the development gets included then in their proposal. So we go through all of the minutes to make sure that they haven't missed something that they promised to do specifically in the neighborhood meeting. In this case, they didn't make any new assurances. So on the beach side, you're probably familiar with this now. They've come back, or they have come in with a proposal that would at least give us one driveway in and out of the development instead of an entire property of pull-on parking. And they, of course, had to, and the specifics of exactly how things are designed and turning radius and everything of that nature gets reviewed in even more detail when we get into the site plan review. But initially, this is what has been proposed for the ground floor. And the ground floor on the east side, as you have seen, involves a split retail along the front of the building and parking behind that with the two floors of parking above that. In this case with the PD, one of the conditions that the staff has recommended was that there be architectural detail added to the garage so it didn't look like a garage. It's a pretty intense, plain-looking building to be that close to residential. And so we had asked specifically for mullions or some kind of architectural design. At this point, the only thing that's been brought back was drawings with plants along the walls, and which wouldn't meet what the staff was expecting, but those kind of conditions need to be spelled out in more detail by the Planning Commission and the City Commission when they go to review. The development plan includes a data table that shows all of the uses, the exact floor area ratios, the densities, the impacts, that counts out the square footage of each type of use. There's a great deal of detail in this. It also breaks down the parking and how the parking is counted. And you'll need to pull this up on your computers if you want to see the detail, or come in and look at the big plan because it's just so much on that page. We've been over and over this with them in great deal of detail to make sure that all of the numbers are correct and accurate and reflect the review, especially as it pertains to the floor area ratio and the density and intensity of use. Now, we had, it was mentioned in the petitioner's presentation that they had requested the ability to average the intensity and density of use. That is something that is allowed administratively in the code, and so it's just a matter of them coming in with an application and are agreeing to which measure they're using based on what the zoning, the underlying zoning or the intended use is. But it has to be consistent with the comprehensive plans, floor area ratio, and density. We can't go any higher than the comprehensive plan allows. However, it does allow you to take several parcels, include them all in a single site, and just average the density across them and give you credit for the size of that site plan instead of just the one lot by lot measurement. So the floor area ratios in the various the zoning categories have been presented here, and when they are all added together as a total, they come to 58,630 square feet, and the proposal that's been presented by the petitioner is for 58,005.05 square feet. So they come in just a little bit underneath the floor area ratio maximum that's allowed. The density is reliant upon that redevelopment that we just discussed, because it gives them credit for the 3 units on the residential side that they would be averaging into this and would be placing on the west side of the parcel. And it also gives them credit for the number of units that are still available per floor area ratio once we take the retail floor area ratio out of the east side site. And that's explained on the bottom in the little asterisk, to make sure that we aren't double counting floor area ratio and density. We took the retail out before calculating the density that's allowed on that west side. That was, so it comes to 22 temp units. And then the redevelopment of the 31 that was requested tonight as part of the redevelopment plan for 31 on the west side that is currently in the Schooner development, and that altogether that is 53 temporary lodging units and 3 residential units. Oops, I went the wrong way. So you will notice, and you've seen it before if you've been here before, the staff report is broken out to go over the sections of the PD and the requirements for a PD, and to explain the manner in which the staff analyze the things that we analyze in that section, and at the end of it to offer a staff recommendation for finding. When you're voting on a quasi-judicial item, you have to base your votes on findings of fact. Those have to be best available data that's available to you in this hearing. And so we make recommended findings throughout here. You can use those as your findings when you make your vote, or you can alter them, or come up with other findings that you think are more specific or based on different or better data. Just so that in the end, whatever decision you make, you reference findings. So that's the purpose in our putting them in here, so you have something to work with if you agree with the data that's being provided and the analysis provided by the staff. So one thing that you have to have is consistency with the comprehensive plan, and you'll notice that in here we have a finding that shows there's no change of land use or designation is requested for the PD, and it spells out that several policy areas within the comprehensive plan and the future land use elements in particular that are consistent and allow for what's being requested here. It addresses both the area of land which is zoned for R3 medium and the R2 separately, and the C3, and addresses each of what would be required in those. I think we've covered all that. I just want to make sure that you understand that what's being proposed is open space for the R2 lot, and it uses it kind of as a buffer between the development and the residential as you move into that area. It can accommodate some drainage. It shouldn't be accommodating the entire site's drainage because it has a lower impact development approved or type approved for it with its land use. And I want to make a point also in that regard that what's shown in the updated proposal is actually a layout for a park, a playground, and that the city hasn't contemplated taking responsibility or taking that on as a public park. Because of the land use and the zoning, the city could make it a public facility, but there's been no analysis of that, and so we're not proposing that. From the staff's standpoint, we just think it should be labeled as open space, and we can, the city's not going to take responsibility for the expense, the security, liability of a piece of land, not even knowing for sure what it can be used for and if it's in the city's best interest. And I can't speak to that as the city anyway. So staff is recommending that just be considered open space.
Is that something that would be addressed in the development agreement?
Yes, but you should specify that in your findings, and it's included in the findings here that we've proposed tonight.
Understood. Thank you.
So it has to be consistent with standards and practices. Of course, as we come through the land development process, anything that's developed there is going to have to go through the same site plan process. So all the land development, floodplain, the normal site plan requirements for drainage, parking, access, handicap access, landscaping, setbacks, those sort of things are either addressed specifically in the development agreement or they will be used in accordance with the code. They will have to meet code. So they will meet all the development standards. They meet all stormwater, traffic impact, coastal development, and floodplain requirements. The building code, of course, when the building comes back in, it has to go through a full review, and it will meet all those codes. And it'll be the review process during which we are able to get, as I said, the state approvals for water management and environmental impact and traffic. So one of the other things we need to look at is whether design furthers the comprehensive plan. This one is providing a mixed use. We're supposed to have, in the comp plan, it calls for retail on ground level wherever possible. The hotel rooms are on the beach side. Our comprehensive plan speaks repeatedly about support of tourism and tourist growth and support. We are to reduce the overall parking footprint wherever possible, and that's done through the provision of structured parking, providing for the movement, to move the crosswalk on Gulf Boulevard would minimize the pedestrian and auto interaction, and that if not, we've recommended a condition that they provide valet parking. That was mentioned earlier as part of the presentation. Actually, one of our conditions is that they do include valet parking. This is not the only place in town other than there's valet parking at the Cambria. There's valet parking that would be required for all the town center developments, and we have it here, there, with some of the other developments as they come up the West events and places like that. So actually, that's becoming pretty common here. It gives us an opportunity to share parking throughout the community and take advantage of both fuller uses of city lots and other unoccupied business lots during the evening, things of that nature. It also pays careful attention to the site design details, the scaling and the buffering. As I said, we are concerned about buffering between the development and the residential, and also the impact of, I've lost my thought, I'm sorry. The impact of in terms of scale and style and design, that's really the impact that the visuals of a parking garage have, having some architectural detail to break that up. It's the consolidated development of several lots. This is going to make a big difference in terms of traffic circulation in the area for safety, because right now it's a mess out there, not only on Gulf Boulevard, but along 146, that's just wide open, that whole parking lot on the east side. So we have to show that we have adequate facilities, and that some of that is determined during the level of service review for site plan, but we have looked at things ahead of time and always have to, when changing zoning or making any kind of adjustments or increases, check to make sure that there's adequate facilities. Currently, we are showing that there is adequate facility to accommodate all of the requirements of the Florida statutes and city ordinances, and then again, the exact detail of that will be designed into the building development and the site plan review when it comes back before this board. The traffic impacts have to be addressed, and Robert's been up talking about them one time, but they'll be more detailed when DOT is looking at the actual site plan when we get past the zoning. The design intent of the height increase. The purpose of that is has been discussed about trying to get everything on one side closer to the beach to try to reduce the conflict between the pedestrians and the automobiles. It also gives the property a maximum density or floor area ratio in a manner that it can be contained. The plan concentrates all the density and combines the site on the beach side. We've talked about the height and how limiting it is otherwise. As a matter of fact, when we talked about having it on two different sides, even if it was split, in order to get enough stories, we'd have to have a PD on both sides, or a PD for both would have to be in effect for both buildings. It couldn't move forward without a PD because there's still not enough height to accommodate that split on each side of the street. So also putting the density on one side, of course, that gives us a lower impact on the east side. Now, it's been mentioned that there are benefits to the community when asking about planning analysis. And the last time we went through this process, the staff did the analysis, but we didn't get into a whole lot of detail in the hearing or necessarily in the report either about exactly what things we were looking at. But when adding the height, there are two different things that the code requires. One is there's two different ways that you can look at it. One is that you can average it out among surrounding properties that have the same zoning and use. And that's a little bit tricky here because if you look at the plan, you realize that there aren't any other lots that are zoned for PD and in use as hotel. So we don't have an example immediately around. And so we have to move on to the other option, which is the additional stories above the limitations can be considered in light of voluntary provisions of civic or community enhancements. In part, what we need to look at is exactly what are we considering extra height over, because the PD is, so we expect there's going to be some additional height. What's considered really extra and above normal? We did look at the history of hotels and PDs as they've been approved throughout the city over the last few years, and those are averaging around 7 floors. They average out at 7 floors, some of them with activities on the roof. And then we also looked generally along the beach, went out and counted everything individually again, and just looked at the multi-story post-firm buildings, things that have been built in accordance with FEMA, so they have parking underneath, the multi-family type things. So those multi-story structures are an average of 6. So it's not unusual to have things at least at 6 or 7 if you're going to be a hotel in the area. This is proposed to be 8 if you include everything, the ground and the roof. And so we still are looking for what are the real benefits to the community in doing that. Okay, so the ground floor retail, some of the things that you can include or consideration are ground floor retail, expanded setbacks in the front or a build-to line, enhanced landscaping, and other design enhancements furthering the policies and strategies of the comprehensive plan. We did ask, as soon as they came in, they initially did not have the commercial on the ground floor, and it was one of the first things that the staff asked for way back several iterations ago, is please put retail on the ground floor of the parking structure, because parking structures are not attractive to walk next to. And so in support of a good pedestrian life on the street and a better economic condition on the street, it's always advised that you put something of interest there, some retail or interactive use on the ground floor. That, of course, increases the cost of the building, but they responded immediately to that request. We also asked if they would put in repaving and sidewalks and landscaping along both 145th and 146th, the full length of their property. That area needs upgrading for the roadways. They would not necessarily be requested to do that, especially given the fact they have no entrance on 145th Avenue, but they agreed to do those as additional conditions of in favor of being able to go a little bit higher. We also talked about the architectural detail in the garage, adding something to make it more acceptable and blend better with that side of the property, and also about having no use, figuring out a way to move their density on the residential property over and to just leave that one residential property open as buffering between them and the neighborhood. So there were a number of benefits that were requested. We also have a condition where there's been limitations established for how much operation would be allowed on the beach. and we hammered through all that in great detail the last time we came through. But wanted to specify particularly that it's not intended ever, even if it comes under private ownership, to be fenced off, which is a critical thing because we've made a big point of trying to collect enough record to show how much of the beach is public use, how much is public investment, in order to keep it from being fenced off by private property owners. So we've added setbacks. We've also asked them please to pull their building up to a build-to line on the east side of the site because our current setbacks often require a 20-foot setback, which is not in keeping with modern urban standards. We want to pull things up closer to the sidewalk to keep it more pedestrian supportive. So that was another concession, was figuring out how to design it around those new design standards. Initially, you'll recall they were coming in with the potential for a two-phase project, but it's all going to be built as a single phase now, so we don't have to worry about the building going up before the parking's ready. That's all going to be done at once. So that was a change from last time you saw it. All of those have been gone over. We do want to point out that redevelopment is sometimes hard if people giving up things that they're used to looking at. Even if it's not necessarily been great, it's hard to see change, but some form of redevelopment is what propels us forward to meet current standards, especially for things like drainage, parking, and access, and some of those other safety floodplain issues, getting things up off the ground. So we have to find ways to get along with redevelopment in a manner that really serves the community. And we will meet all, as I said, land development criteria. So the staff recommends approval with conditions. Those are listed in section A, or 1A through R, and in great detail. And I don't think that you want me to read them to you in detail either, but I've gone through a lot of those. They do deal, some of them deal with the lighting and signaling and the need for the valet. They will meet all the development regulations. Also, the hotel can provide hotel guests with lounge chairs, cabanas for use on the beach, but will provide services to these guests as is customary for hotels. Non-hotel guests will have access to the restaurants, but the restaurant service will not be extended to the beach, and no tables or chairs or picnic tables or seating will be allowed. That's important because we don't want to increase any more than necessary the traffic on the beach, and certainly don't want those restaurants to just expand their restaurant service out onto the beach. That has not only impacts for the beach and the environment, but also that would mean more parking, and that's not going to work. The hotel events operations will utilize the beach area for special events when they're approved as special events through the city. Everybody can do that now. We just wanted to recognize in our conditions that it wasn't preventing them from doing the events the way everybody else has the right to do events. And that they would make themselves responsible for policing the area to ensure that there's no trash and things aren't left out on the beach, especially things that would impede traffic of the sea turtles. And they may need to rearrange their activities if it becomes obvious there are sea turtles in the area. And that specific is in letter J. It talks about the lighting requirements during sea turtle, but we have a pretty comprehensive plan for lighting control now, and we'll be meeting all of those codes and work with them on their lighting, and also just general activities. The garage is mentioned there. The dune walkover is required for the hotel ground floor to beach access to ensure preservation and protection of the dune system. We talk about the dumpsters at the hotel. They may need more space. If so, they have one parking space to spare out of what's required of them if they need to expand their dumpster area to use an extra space for that. We'll work with them about what's the best placement of the dumpster and work with the people over at our Public Works Department as well. I talked about the park concept, and we're not accepting responsibility for the park. Also, it couldn't be built as a major park anyway, because the amount of use, if it's built out and used for private use, the amount of use would only be that which was commensurate with the use and ancillary to what was required or allowed on that property, and only had 3 units there. So a park for 3 units is all the park that could really be approved there under private use. Talked about the coastal A zone, just to make sure everybody remembers there's a coastal A zone now. In the preservation land, we did leave that condition in that if it remained, or if it turned out not to have ownership shown, that it would be removed, and it was removed. In that we left in the rest of that designation for public access along the beach. So staff recommends approval with the long list of conditions, and we move the report, the slideshow, our findings and recommendations into the record, and for your suggested consideration.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Portal, for that very thorough presentation. I think it covered a lot of ground. As most of you are aware, we've been through this a few times, and each time it gets tweaked a little more. So I think as a board, we've been over it several times, but I want to open up to see if anyone has any questions from the board to the city.
I just have a couple, Linda. I just want to clarify or make sure in the conditions that staff is recommending, do you call out in there, I don't recall, the decorative detail on the garage? That is in there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But there wasn't anything, earlier we talked about unity of title and parking, looking into using the building for parking for hurricanes, emergencies, et cetera?
Right, that's not in there.
Okay.
We didn't, I mean, there's nothing that says
so if we
can't work something out with them where you could suggest that as an added condition.
Okay. And we would just do that.
Yeah, and unity of title I didn't address. I'm sorry, Mr. Curry. Your concerns are very well founded, but this would all be a single site plan under a single plan development with a development agreement that handles all of it, so you can't break it apart in the future. And Mr. Trask is usually really good about putting that language in that obligates it as part of a single development. Now, as he said, you know, in the future, if the city came through and changed all its land use and allowed for it would have to go through a considerable process, a hearing process, and really, it maxes out in a safe way, as safe as you can be with the floor area ratio, because there's nothing left to transfer around, which is why actually we wouldn't have objected if that preservation land on the beach had been part of it, because even if they transferred this tiny little bit that they could have built on the beach, if they transferred it somewhere else, then nothing could be put on the beach. So it's sometimes just a way of preserving it permanently from even the smallest amount of floor area ratio, but really nobody can build out there anyway, so. But this effectively works as a unity of title. I mean, they can have extra forms and extra title work done if it becomes is more comfortable for the board or the commission, but it all has that effect.
Thank you. I do have one other question. The rooftop bar, I know there's always a concern about noise after a certain period of time. Was that in the conditions that you had outlined there?
We had before, I want to go back through that. Do you remember where that was? It's in the development agreement. Okay. Yeah, I knew we spent a whole lot of time on that before, but it was in the development agreement, which is why we remember it, but it does show up here. I mean, those kind of provisions can be carried over in here because they were pretty detailed. It's not a problem for them to be in both places, but we ended up adding things on to the development agreement as it came through this board, and then it went to the commission that way too.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And if the commission wanted that add or reflected in here, you could add that to your conditions and findings.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions for Ms. Portal? All right. Thank you. So our next, Mr. Trask, you want to give me a school on what to do?
Yeah, so next we need to ask Ms. Cole whether she has any cross-examination
Thank you.
questions for Ms. Portal. Any questions? Okay, no questions. Then you would just go to your public comment and you would receive from public.
Very good. Anyone from the public that would like to speak for or against the proposed redevelopment plan, please, when you come to the podium, give us your name, your address, and you'll be limited to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening. Chuck Dillon, 529 Lillian Drive. Excuse me. Just a couple of the things I know can't get into anything, but there's no regards to setbacks. If you look at this, there's a 1-inch setback on the beach, 5 foot on the south side, 10 foot on the north side. When I built my house, it was a 15-foot setback, but I had to have 7 and 8. So they changed it. How is no one beyond 300 feet affected by this? I didn't know about any of these meetings. I would have loved to have gone to some of the meetings. Also, the floors 3 through 8, are they the same that they were before, or have they changed and gotten larger? Finally, the height is 104 foot 6. The ARIDOM is 57 feet. The garage is 4 floors. I'm not sure what the height is because I couldn't read it on the plans. The condo next to the garage or across the street from the garage is 38 feet. Also, the height is down 10 feet from where they had it before. And they have done a great job on the parking. So I'm not opposed to this. It's just, where are we as a city benefiting by this PD? PDs, the city is supposed to benefit by what they're doing as to what we're giving up. We're giving up a lot, it seems like. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Please step up to the podium.
Hello, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mike Burke. I'm at 14401 Gulf Boulevard, Madeira Beach. There's been a lot of material presented here tonight, and even though I followed the project, there's still a lot of material here presented tonight. And it seems to me that when you consider that you've got a corridor review process being recommended for you in the next item down on this agenda, that it would be putting the cart before the horse to consider the Schooner project before you do the corridor review project. Otherwise, anybody coming along on the corridor review project is going to say, well, the Schooner set the precedent, and we think you should give us whatever you gave the Schooner, and that height should not be an issue. The Schooner proposal really raises all of the same issues that the corridor review project does. Traffic would be a bigger issue, but it's mostly the same stuff. There have been certainly significant 3 to 5 story residential buildings built along the beach and along the east side of Gulf Boulevard over the past few years that are really rounding out and intensifying development within Madeira Beach as it is. The nature of the corridor review project, when it's just referred to as a community plan, didn't really give the kind of effective notice that I, who was watching the projects, I didn't realize that there was a corridor review being proposed. And so I think I think there's progress here, and it's great to see the progress, but I think that it would behoove us to consider the whole corridor. If the whole corridor is going to be considered as an activity center, then this Schooner project should be considered within that same context as the rest of the corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak?
Tom Edwards, protected address, Madeira Beach resident. I would just suggest that you not approve the plan development agreement yet and postpone it until there's a final development agreement. I mean, I'm still hearing that they're still working on this, and we aren't going to know what all the details are going to be until in January. So I think you're putting the cart before the horse in this fashion. You know, we don't know what the noise buffering is. I mean, I didn't see any detail that was presented to the public as what the noise buffering is going to be for the rooftop bar, and I understand that there's going to be an 80-seat restaurant there. I didn't hear any details as what kind of liquor license they're seeking. There would be more aesthetic parking garage would be nice to get the details on that before you approve this. So I think you need more details about the project. Wait until January to get more details before, and let the public see it before you go ahead and vote on this tonight. Underground utilities, I didn't hear anything about that. We're undergrounding utilities along Gulf Boulevard. It's in the project, so all new development is supposed to have that, I believe, with underground utilities, but I didn't hear anything about that. We looked at the height of the building, and, you know, I saw some pictures there, but we didn't see what was the distance from each of those that was presented by staff as to averaging height. Now, you got affected area is usually just in a 300-foot radius, but we didn't. The buildings in that area don't rise to this height. So if you're expanding the height averaging, then you need to expand the area that you go ahead and notify folks that could be affected by this project, and have them come and also be affected parties. And then, you know, I'd like to hear more about the benefits to the public with what we're giving up with the setbacks and the height. There's more detail that should come out as what is the public benefit in this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? We got room for a couple more. Come on up.
Hey guys, Jeff Beggins, 429 Boca Chica Drive, one of the partners in the project here. One of the things because we have a couple new members of the commission that didn't hear this the other 7 times we've done this, I just wanted to bring up something I think is pretty relevant. The PD process as it sits is designed for exactly what we're doing right here, taking a specific individual location and the uniqueness of that specific site and seeing how this works, right? When you look at that property, the other view is better to watch this because I live in the town, have business in the town, and love the town, and would only even think about bringing this project together because of the specific location. We have no neighbor to the south. We have a county park. We have no neighbor to the west. There's Waves. No neighbor to the east. It's us, and one neighbor to the north. And we spent a ton of time with the neighbors to the north at the Aerodam building, and we worked with them with design constraints and redesign of this building to turn it from a rectangle, which would have blocked all of their views, and we turned it into an L shape so they can preserve their view quarters on that entire side of the building. So we could have swapped it. Great, thanks for putting that back. Now, if this was squashed and wider, we would have screwed them completely on that side, right? So we sat with them and worked with them and said, what can we do to be good neighbors? There's nobody else that's affected by this. We own the property on the other sides. That gives them a view, which is the reason why we're as high as we are, for that one reason alone. If this was anywhere else, we never even would have thought about it. So I just want you guys to know what caused this. Does that make sense? So that's what I wanted to bring up.
Thank you. Do we have any more? Thank you.
Jean Farnan, 574 Johns Pass Avenue. I'd really like you people to think about the precedent that you're setting and some of the really somewhat failed plan developments that have gone on here. The Barefoot, basically what's going to end up, you're going to have a corridor of tall buildings that nobody sees the sunshine on Gulf Boulevard. Caddy's is hideous, and it wasn't good for the neighborhood. All these things weren't considered. But, I mean, there's a very simple solution to this, is that you just have less units and have a lower building, because a 105-foot building, it sets a precedence, and then the next one that comes in, and the next one, or if they stay equally, it really ruins our town. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any more from the audience would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comments on this topic. Thank you, everyone, for your input.
Mr. Chair, a couple of things I do want to clear up is that the undergrounding of the utilities is listed as condition B. It's required anyway, but we specified it in there. The noise provisions in the development agreement, as it's moving forward and as it was approved last time, at this level are extensive, and I can go over those if you still have interest in that. And then, to be clear, on tonight's agenda, we are not discussing a corridor plan.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Trash, see anything that needed to be addressed by anybody that was brought up?
So, Mr. Chair, the next step in your code provision allows for rebuttal testimony or evidence. So you've heard some of that from Linda. Ms. Cole may have some. If there is none, then there would just be a summary by the city, if needed, and a summary by the applicant, and then it would be to the commission for consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Anything to rebut? Ms. Portal, anything to rebut?
No.
Beyond what was stated? Okay. A summary from the applicant, please.
Thank you. As has been alluded to, this has been a long journey, beginning in 2015 or 2016 with an original plan that, while shorter in height somewhat, had its own issues. Taking that a step back and creating a new plan that was approved this summer, both by a recommendation of approval by this board and by the City Commission, which was approximately 15 feet taller in height. And the developer understood that that was a concern of the community and understood that they wanted to see more details and understand how this project would come to life. And so he worked very closely with staff to reduce the height of the building, to reduce the square footage of the building, and thereby lowering the FAR, and to really finalize the conditions that Ms. Portal has gone through that evidence the public benefit. And as Mr. Trask outlined, the basis of tonight's decision is competent substantial evidence. And have you received competent substantial evidence that this application meets in the code? You have the staff report and you have the application, and that's the only evidence that's been presented tonight. We have heard the opinion of some of our neighbors, which we have heard several times over the past several months as well. We've taken those opinions into account to further develop and refine a plan that provides a public benefit with open space and buffering to the east, significant landscaping and public improvements to the roadways, working with FDOT on a crosswalk, which would benefit and provide a safer access across Gulf Boulevard. And each one of these criteria for approval, the applicant's taken extremely seriously and work with staff to ensure that this application meets those criteria. We appreciate your recommendation of approval to the Commission of both the redevelopment plan, which articulates exactly why in this code the city has contemplated the need for redevelopment and the desire for redevelopment, and how to vest these units and ensure that the opportunities are not lost. We also respectfully request your recommendation of approval of our planned development, rezoning and amendment to the existing zoning with this revised concept plan, which reduces the impact to the neighbors, reduces the FAR, reduces the height, and provides a plan that we can all be proud of here in Madeira Beach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Portal, any summary?
I just want to remind the Commission that the staff report is extensive and that reference to that and its findings are important in your decision-making, or that you need to specify other findings of your own based on what you've heard tonight. I think that we had worked extensively with the property owner, but also considering all the comments we've been getting from the public over time to try to make it clear where the floor area ratio was derived, how the density was counted, specifically also dealing with things like design and setbacks and buffering and the height, and wanted to make sure that we had used all of what the code provided us as an opportunity to be sure there was a list of public good coming out of this and that it was in some way tied directly to the main concern, our request, which is the height of the building. This being quasi-judicial, we have to apply the code. It's not a matter of our deciding we're not going to do any more development now until we do land use later. We don't have that option. That's not something we can evaluate. We use the code here and a quasi-judicial and have to use real data and analysis as it's presented. And so we recommend approval with all the conditions that we've specified, and these are pretty important to the staff because there were a lot of the specifics they discussed there are addressed, especially as it relates to those extra benefits that the community is getting from the property development.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Trask, would you suggest that we now discuss this as a board on an individual basis or put the two together for a summary vote of both?
It absolutely needs to be done on an individual basis.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so our planning commission would like to just have you consider at this point the new business B RDV 2021-01 Schooner redevelopment. So open up for conversation among the board for deliberation and or a motion.
Sitting through multiple meetings and just hearing feedback from the community, it's my feeling it's the best alternative would be to approve this with the extensive conditions and adding, even though it's in the planning, to add for the noise consideration, because I know that is probably, other than height, the number one question in everyone's mind. I think the community is, yeah, it's a tourist area, but it's a residential community, and I think we need to take as much care of that as we possibly can. So we can't restrict access to the parking. It is a private area, and it's needed. I mean, there's complaints that there's not enough parking as it is. However, I would like to bring that up as a consideration to ownership to give back to the community, especially on hurricane times. And I'd like that to be in the record that at least it was requested.
Okay, so my question to either Mr. Trask or Ms. Portal would be, could we adequately address those items in the development agreement without having to add them as conditions to this approval or denial, or would it be best to add them at this time?
My suggestion is you add them at this time. We will definitely address them in the development agreement as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Kerr, do you have any specific language you would like to add to the conditions? We have A through R at this point. Is there any specific language you would like to have added there before we?
Well, as far as the noise, I think we went over that in detail in previous meetings, so I would refer back to staff to what's actually in the agreement, the plan development agreement.
Please.
Do you want me to read that out? We have copies.
Sure. I mean, in the interest of being clear so that we don't find ourselves
All right.
back here again at some point, would like to properly, notice those things into the record so that we have them for when we're considering this.
It's long, that's why I was asking, so I'm going to read.
Okay, well, for clarity, I suppose we probably should go ahead and read it, just so we have it in the record. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. No activity involving amplified sound shall be conducted exterior to or upon the rooftop amenity level and the pool deck of the hotel, provided, however, the foregoing shall not preclude the use of music in connection with the rooftop amenity level of the hotel, so long as the music is directed towards the west, the beach, and is otherwise baffled to prevent the sound from traveling to the north, south, or east of the hotel building. The developer shall enter into a separate recordable form restrictive covenant in favor of the city, parent, to be recorded at the time of recording of the development agreement, close parent, setting forth the aforesaid use restrictions. The form of the restricted covenant is attached hereto as Exhibit C. Outdoor uses and activities are allowed for the east parcel in accordance with land use designation and all city ordinances in effect at the time.
Thank you. For clarity, should we note that as staff recommendation, the condition S?
Yes.
Okay, so we will call that condition S related to the noise. Ma'am, comment?
If I may.
We okay?
So, your rules don't specifically address having the up-down situation, and in fact, your rules specifically say that the board shall publicly deliberate on the evidence and shall limit its deliberation to the evidence presented at the hearing. During the deliberation, no further testimony shall be taken, and the board shall not ask for additional information of the parties or witnesses.
Okay.
That's your current code provision.
Perfect.
I mean, if you want to go outside of that, I would not suggest that, but I don't want you to be stalled here and moving forward.
Right on.
For clarification, I was not looking to provide testimony or evidence. I had a question for clarification on the condition as proposed.
Your opinion?
If you want to allow it.
We'll hear the question and decide whether we want to take it into consideration.
Okay.
When you recited the condition, it was slightly different than my version, so I just wanted to clarify. In the first sentence, no activity involving amplified sound shall be conducted exterior to or upon the rooftop amenity level and pool deck is what you said. So in the second, after the semicolon, should it not also be rooftop amenity pool and pool deck? Just for consistency. I didn't.
I see. Thank you. To specify there are two different pool or two different decks.
Correct. So pool deck should be referenced both times.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to.
So we're talking more of a scrivener's error.
It's just additional information. It's clear that from the lawyers and Linda that the idea is to make sure that it covers both.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it was being read into the record, I just wanted to be sure we didn't
Thank you.
get in trouble having to change it later. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, so that covers condition S. Mr. Kerr, back to you. Was there something additional you felt like you wanted to add?
Well, I don't think the parking thing is just something for consideration. Okay. I don't think that needs to be for the approval.
All right, fair enough. Anyone else have anything from our planning commission that they'd like to bring up, discuss, motion? Quiet group tonight.
Okay, and this is just on the first agenda item. And so you've got a staff recommendation on page 9 of your packet that may be helpful in making your motion. And then as for the PD, that is on pages 51 through 57, if that's of help to you.
Right. Okay, we're going to need a motion. I know I'm usually the motion maker here, but now you took me out of that chair, so.
You can pass the gavel if you would want to do that. Your first vice chair is Mr. Kerr. He would have to take the gavel.
I'd like to make a motion. I'm just trying to make sure I make it correctly. Looking for the page 9.
It's page 9 of 180.
Right. It's not coming up for me correctly, but bear with me.
There's page 9 of 180 there.
Oh, I have it printed out, but I don't have it per the, okay. Yeah, but I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the request for redevelopment, RDV 2021-01, with the staff recommendations, including letter S, which we added here this evening. I guess that's it.
So the letter S condition is on the PD zoning portion of it.
Right.
So this would be just
But it was added here to the recommendations.
right, for the second question on the agenda.
Oh, that was on the rezoning?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I will second that.
Okay, so for clarity, the motion is to recommend approval of the redevelopment plan, RDV 2021-01 Schooner redevelopment, and as I'm assuming based on A through S conditions, it would be conditioned upon the approval of the second part of this. Is that correct, Mr. Trask?
You can handle it that way.
Would that be an amendment to the motion? It would be the approval of this would be conditioned on the approval of the second part as well, because the conditions are
Everything we've done here tonight has been combined.
yeah, but we have to vote on
yeah,
them. We have to vote on them separately. So in order to vote on them separately, we can do an approval condition upon approval of the second half.
On the approval of the second half. It's perfect.
That keeps it clean. Okay, we have that clearly stated for everyone's records. We okay with that? Ms. Trash, you comfortable with that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion from our panel? I'd like to call the roll, please.
Okay, Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly?
Yes.
Commissioner Latzo?
Yes.
And Chairman Wyckoff?
Yes, our motion carries. Our second item under new business is the PD 2021-02 Schooner rezoning. Obviously, we don't want to go through the entire process again, but Mr. Trask, would it be appropriate to ask for a summary on this topic?
You don't need to have that unless you want it. I mean, there has been a presentation by both. It was combined.
Okay, perfect.
So you can just do your motion. And again, I would remind you that your findings, the findings of the city staff are on pages 51 through 57 with the staff recommendation as well. And so you may want to incorporate those findings and the conditions, including condition S, that had been discussed during the previous motion.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve the PD 2021 rezoning with staff recommendations A through S.
I'll second.
For clarity, that motion would be to approve PD 2021-02. Just make sure we get it right.
I'll second that.
And we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion from our panel members? I'd like to call for the vote, please.
Okay, Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly?
Yes.
Commissioner Latzo?
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff?
Yes.
Carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. On to our next order of new business, CPA 2021-01 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. land use.
Okay, well, thank you. Letting everybody settle. I appreciate your patience. This is in regards to the community planning process that's been taking place. We had discovered over time that there were inconsistencies between the city's comprehensive plan and the county's, and we are obligated by law to be consistent with each other. And in addition to that, when looking into detail with current technology available, found that even the city's existing land uses don't really cover and protect what has historically been built in various parts of the city. There are two areas of concern. One is the east side of Gulf Boulevard, which was referenced as the potential for a corridor plan. That's one option for going with that, but the Forward Pinellas has asked us to deal with the areas in two separate events and processes, and so we have not brought anything forward dealing with that area along Gulf Boulevard. What we were focusing on now is the Johns Pass Village Activity Center type area, and we're referring to it the Activity Center because historically it had been referred to locally as the Activity Center, but there weren't adequate policies to support that over time, and so the county has not referred to it as Activity Center or included it in their definition. So what we have to go through is explain to you not just what's specifically proposed in the plan, but just where we are in the planning process right now so that you understand what's being proposed tonight, which is actually only to add a definition to the comprehensive plan that allows us to use the activity center category as it's defined in the county's plan, something consistent with them. We can make some tweaks, but we don't even have the capacity to consider using an activity center as a designation right now because it's not defined in our plan. So that's what's coming before you. But I wanted to update you on how that fits in with the rest of the planning process because some people have been involved with this all along. We would not be here talking about a corridor plan or any other portion without having advertised that first. So this is just to update you on where we are with the Activity Center. We made this presentation to the Commission the other night, so I appreciate the patience of those who have been through it before. Oh, apparently I'm in charge again. But I can't read my own stuff that far away. All right, so currently the county has a designation for the Johns Pass area broken up into several different categories. One is the red that is they call the retail and services, which they have designated as a 0.55 floor area ratio. That is an extremely low floor area ratio and would not cover, I'm not aware of anything it would cover in the pass except perhaps some of the buildings directly on the, right on the pass itself. And then some of the buildings on Pelican, for instance. Otherwise, everything would be non-conforming. That's a big concern for us because we're not supposed to allow things to be non-conforming. We're supposed to have a plan by state law that provides for what you have, the protection of existing neighborhoods and development, and provides for future intended development, including all anticipated changes in population, density, or type of development in terms of keeping economically stable, whatever you anticipate over time. We also are supposed to consider environmental concerns as they change, and as we know, we're all in a entirely new world that we weren't considering in planning 30 years ago when this plan was first put together. So, but the county right now has designated for that retail services, the resort floor area ratio at 1.2 is that the blue area, and then the residential medium floor area ratio 0.5 is what we've are showing along Pelican Lane. we wanted to include the entire area as part of the activity center, or at least whatever land use the city ends up putting onto it, as one contiguous area, because each of those pieces interplays with the others in terms of supporting the population that frequents the retail, or the retail to support the population, and also wanted to include Pelican because poor Pelican Lane has its own zoning that they changed years ago because it was distinct from the rest of the residential on the other ends of it. But they didn't change the land use underneath, and so now actually you can't use either. And it didn't provide it with the protection really it needed. Now, most of the interest in Pelican has been for continued residential development to pretty much the scale that's there now. But we do need to always consider the impact that it's feeling from the back end of the village, Boulevard. So, again, these are the categories the little dotted line there is to show you what areas, all the hashed areas and shaded areas are the ones that we were including in there. And it includes a little bit beyond what some people would consider the past, because there's kind of a transitional area where the density and intensity steps down before it gets into what is more the norm along the beach further to the north. Oh, yes. We also want to make note, there's that lime green stuff in there, and right along, there you go, Jenny, thank you. Right along there, for some reason, the county in their plan had designated that as recreation open space. But it's a space, it's kind of a no man's land, space between the historic lot lines of those lots and the construction control line. And our code says that wherever you abut the construction control line, you can consider that construction control on the back end of your property in terms of density, setbacks, and things that way. This has created a rec open space area we have absolutely no access to in order to maintain, and nobody has any rights to do anything with it. So we wanted to clean that up. There's also a spot that runs right through the middle of the Madeira Bay development area that's designated, again, for open space, but it has a utility pump in it. It's actually an easement. And easements do not typically get their own land use, so we'd like it to be returned to its proper land use as part of the development. The easement will stay in place, but for heaven help us if we have to go through all the way through town and assign separate land uses to every easement or setback. So that's just really highly unusual. We'd like to take the opportunity to clean those kinds of things up. Okay, I think it's important to remember that partially what we're doing here is we're trying to convince the county to change their plan to be consistent with our development style and history. And so one of the portions of our application up to the county is going to be a detailed history, really, of how we got to where we are right now. Because the proposal I'm not sure where it came from, I wasn't involved at the time, the idea that we would take Johns Pass Village and turn it into a .55 retail, which looks kind of like a McDonald's parking lot and small strip development, is so entirely inappropriate. And it's not only for what it is right now and what but what it's been historically. So starting the first homestead was registered in 1912. After that, by 1914, the next registered development on the beach was a hotel. That hotel got regularly blown down by storms, but it kept getting built back. And in fact, it was still sitting there the first time people came back to plat the land, the Mitchell subdivision out there. They just platted around it as if it wasn't there. But the hotel was still sitting there. It's always been, since the very first homestead closed down, it has been a tourist area. The bridges opened up, and that changed everything. It also brought commercial fishing in. So this was very highly advertised throughout the world, actually, for people who wanted to do holiday fishing and vacation fishing trips. And also then when they realized how deep the port was, that the commercial fleet moved in there. So there's been that sometimes uncomfortable mix and inconsistency in involvement over the years, but it's historic to the way Johns Pass has always been developed. That started to change over time. The twin spans came through, that realigned Village Boulevard was no longer the highway. That created all kinds of special problems we'll come back to you with one day. And then additional fishing cottages and rooming houses got built in the 80s. Everything extended along the boardwalk. Some of the buildings along the boardwalk became two-story buildings, which it turns out they were never, I'm not even sure if they was permitted. Probably Treasure Island permitted them for us. That was nice of them. But it was inconsistent with our code. But it happened. They also kindly permitted all of the Hooters and the Hubbard's improvements there without a great deal of detailed concern about whether that met all of our codes and land use intensities at the time either. And so there's a lot of cleanup work to be done. But for the most part, what's really important to note is that these little kind of villages area, especially along Village Boulevard, those buildings are built side to side, front to back. They cover the lot. And if you're over, if you're over 2 stories, or if you're at 2 stories, you're already at a floor area ratio of 2.0. And some of them are more than that because they've got a 3rd story on them. If that's the case, then you're way, way, way above that 0.55 that the county thought was appropriate for Johns Pass. Technically, the whole point in having those regulations and designating some things as non-conforming is if they go away, you're supposed to come back with a development that suits the new code, which means that the intent is to do away with Johns Pass. And when I first brought this to the attention at the county, one response I got was, does it really matter? Aren't you just phasing out Madeira Beach anyway? So I invited them to come say that themselves and propose that as a planning strategy, that we just phase out the city. But no, obviously not the intent to phase out the city. Yeah. I think they were thinking sea level rise and the whole bit, just go ahead and move away. That's not the planning strategy we want to go with. So this is really important too for them to understand. It's kind of a callous response, especially there are activity centers all over the county. Why Johns Pass was never designated one, I have no idea. It was in our plan but didn't get carried over because Johns Pass Village is under the beachgoer, the number 2 destination in Pinellas County. On arts and cultural visitors, it's the number 3. For family traveler, it is the number 1 spot. 48.9% of all family tourists coming to Pinellas County come to Madeira Beach. 40% of all the affluent visitors, 40% of millennials, the Gen Xers are apparently giving up a little bit on it, but and the boomers are down. But you can see that we are within the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd most popular tourist attraction in the county, and definitely a 0.55 is not going to support that kind of activity. So this is important not just to Madeira Beach, but to a broader community, obviously. And I think the people here locally know that, because you know that when you're shopping for local stuff, you don't go down to Johns Pass Village. Well, fish is a good thing to buy down there, but that's not a neighborhood retail center. People come from all over the world to go there. Yes. So the countywide plan and land use categories that they currently have are the residential, medium, the resort, and the retail and services. So we have to look at what's available on the county's menu when we're deciding what do we want to ask to have established on the area. And the one thing that gives us the flexibility to include that mixed mash of uses and sizes and types is an activity center. The activity center, then we looked at what is the level of activity center. As I said, this is clearly not neighborhood retail. And so the next week, there are other options. There's the community or major center or urban center. And it may bring people in of a type that's major, but it's a really small piece of land, and so we thought, oh, let's back down from that a little bit. It's definitely bigger than neighborhood, but probably the highest we would want to recommend is community level, just above that. So that that gives us also the floor area ratio as an option in certain portions of it, of the area, that would cover what's there and some planning options for the future, but also can be divided up, and we'll show you what our intent is here, or our suggestion. First of all, floor area ratio is kind of a confusing concept. To give you an idea, there are a lot of times places have very high floor area ratio, and you think of them as being pretty benign, like 3-story buildings in downtown St. Pete, or something like that is actually a 3.0. Sometimes they're very high, but they're not very big buildings, or even 2-story buildings have a very high FAR because, like I said, they're covering the whole lot. That's similar to what happens along Village Boulevard and the area where the parking garage and some of the newer things that have apartments above the retail. This, though, is to give you an idea what the 0.55 would give us. I don't know about you, but that doesn't look like Johns Pass, nor is that. That's what 0.55 gets you. Those car lots out on Almerton and Roosevelt, that would work out there. Now, we did have some public participation. It's really important to try to get people involved in this, and as you know, we've been trying to draw people in for a while. We had the meeting down at Johns Pass to get input from not just the property owners, but actually the businesses, owners doing business there, people from the area. We had strong attendance with that and a lot of participation. Then we had the longer community-wide hearing process here in this room, and then broke up, after making a presentation, broke up into groups and allowed people to ask questions and work with individual staff members and make input. We also had an online survey. So we've been sorting through the input we've been getting from the community. People have continued to contact us and make observations. And we've been also continuing to work with Forward Pinellas, who we have to coordinate with, and try to get as much input as we can, and have been using that as a basis for recommendations. So this just gives you an idea where some of the other activity centers are. Activity centers are not necessarily very, very intense. For instance, that little downtown golf cart area, even though that's very low intensity, is an activity center. Almost the whole Gulf Boulevard corridor in the St. Pete Beach is designated an activity center. Treasure Island has more than one, right? No, it's just big. It's their whole downtown area. St. Pete Beach has 2. And we would have 2 because technically our downtown urban center here was designated in their activity center category back in 2014 and 15 when it went through hearing process before. The justification, that further justifies it because it's on a corridor with other activity centers. It ties some together. So what we would propose is that this entire area be designated as an activity center of the community level, and this gives an idea of what the maximum uses in the activity center would be. However, we don't propose that the maximum is appropriate every place in Johns Pass. This is a pretty sensitive area, and it's a lot like a little downtown as opposed to just one big activity center in Largo on a highway or something. It's not the situation. So what we would propose is that along with the activity center designation, we would also propose a special area plan that details character districts and limits the floor area ratio, the building height, and the uses that would be allowed in each of these character districts. The yellow designated area would be the what we were proposing to call the traditional village area, And as you can see, Pelican is that low mixed use, just to reflect basically what existing zoning is along there. The area that's in orange would be a core, which has it has the parking garage and the more intense uses that have already been approved at the one end, and deals with flexibility in dealing with the design would be on the parking lot and open areas that remain now in the center. The pink right along Johns Pass, we were designating as the boardwalk area. That's creative, I know. It's the boardwalk area. And one of the conditions we would include with that is that it does not include any tourism units and no residential, because it's just not the right place to be putting people staying. But basically the floor area ratio for that would be what it is now. It wouldn't get any bigger. We just want to be able to cover what's there, and those little two-story buildings right along the path. We have the resort area, as you can see, is the higher intensity residential, and the floor area ratio and the density that we recommended for those are what's necessary to cover what's already built. So we have some really high intensity units, buildings there, and making sure nothing is made non-conforming and can't build back in case of an emergency or disaster, which, we're prone towards. And then there's the transitional area that's already built out, a little bit higher intensity than what's further to the north, but not as high intensity as this southernmost resort area. And again, we are recommending intensities and floor area ratios that allow for the replacement in support of what's already there. And we have gone through every single lot to determine the floor area ratio and density of each. That's the information we have available now that wasn't available years ago when they were first putting these plans together. This, the traditional neighborhood. So there'll be retail uses, services, restaurants, office, temporary lodging, and residential units. The floor area ratio of a 3.0, because there's some there that are approaching that by design. The residential of 25 and temporary lodging of 70, which sounds high, but because the lots are so tiny. So, you can get to a small lot with 2 to 4 units on it, and you've reached 70 units per acre because the lot's so small. The commercial core, also a floor area of 3.0 with residential at 15 units per acre and temporary lodging of 100. Again, that is hotel-type temporary lodging units. And we are trying to get opportunities actually for the bit of hotel that's been added onto the parking garage and the second floor down there. In order to make that's been empty the whole time since it's been built until now. So to try to make sure that we've got things that work on a second floor. The boardwalk, as I said, would be a floor area ratio of 1.5, no residential, no temporary lodging. The low intensity mixed use for Pelican would be pretty much consistent with what's already allowed there in the residential mixed use, low intensity, with the similar floor area ratio and residential and lodging densities. Resort, the same. The floor area ratio we've calculated we needed there would be a 2.0. The residential at 80 units per acre, we do need that in order to cover the buildings that are already there. And the reason we said that was both residential and density. You can't get both. You can't call something 80 residential and then we're going to add 80 more tourists. You can't do that. But what's happened is, as you know, what used to be condo is now being used as tourism units down there. And so to cover both sides in the transition, we've addressed both. And then the transitional would be a floor area of 1.5. It's a little bit lower. The 30 and the 60 units is consistent with what's been developed there. We provided some analysis here on the floor area ratio and the impacts. You could see as a summary off to the side there, the residential units per acre, and community-wide center, according to the county, you could get as high as 90 units per acre, but the average of what we're proposing with these character districts only gets us to 37. The temporary lodging in the county would be 150. The average in the way we've proposed it would be a maximum of 69. And the floor area ratio in the county, as we said, overall for the activity center would be a designation of 3.0, but you couldn't do that in every character district, and so it would average out to 2.08. So this would be a lower intensity activity center than some of the others around the county because of the specificity we put into the special area plan. We have looked at the traffic generation issue. We were thinking that we'd have to do a full-blown traffic plan for that, but as it turns out, the retail and services in the county's calculations have a much higher traffic generation rate than activity center. That makes sense because retail and services people come in, they make one trip, get in their car and leave. Activity center people come and they stay, and so it's one trip in that goes to several places instead of just one place. So they count it as an impact of a 0.5, and once you do that, you can see by comparison the total traffic generation rate for the activity center drops to 4,000, and the comparison on the bottom that would be for the retail services they currently have is counted out as 8,600 trips, whereas we would drop to 4,300 trips is calculated as activity center, which explains why, even though they think it's retail services, in fact, we do not have that much backup, and we're still at level service D, as was mentioned before. The transportation and pedestrian access is an important concept, and it'll tie in later when we start talking about what happens along Gulf Boulevard. They kind of support each other, you know, having an activity center and a mix of uses supports people using more creative transit. At the same time, when we're looking for funding for transit and the transportation hubs that the City Commission's been contemplating, also getting DOT to change the location of lights and crosswalks to try to consolidate things, us to get grants for better signage and wayfinding and support for pedestrian activities. We can get those supports, financial supports, more likely if we're a designated activity center because we have designated it for a mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented type development. So in conclusion, that's where we have been recommending so far. We haven't taken any kind of vote. Obviously, it would have to come to you before the special area plan and the map change would ever be approved, and you have a full public hearing, all of that, and we'll have to vote on everything. But what we have to do, it's a multi-step process. Before we can even come to you recommending an activity center as a designation on the map, or before we can even bring a special area plan for that area, we first have to have the capability of using the activity center designation in our comp plan. So what's proposed here is not to change land use in any particular piece of land, but just to put a new definition in the comprehensive plan, the policy that allows for activity center to be used. We also would hope that when we adopt and upgrade the comprehensive plan later, we would be able to maybe clean up some of the little bit confusing language that applies to the town center, because it's actually an activity center in the county's plan, whereas we designate it for redevelopment zone, and keeping them compatible is tricky, and proving compatibility over time. So it will be an opportunity for us to look at that again when we do land use map change later to see whether we want to update that definition for the town center as well. But first it has to go into the comp plan as an option. So what we have in front of you today is a recommended language, policy language to add, where'd it go? In the comp plan to amend policy 1.1.2 to add activity center. Any activity center which must be regulated by a special area plan. The uses development standards, density, intensity standards, and locational characteristics associated with the category must be set forth in that special area plan. So every single activity center has its own very specific plan. It's not something you just throw on top of a piece of land and walk away and let whatever happen. It has to be very specific. In addition to that, once we get the special area plan in place, and we have to bring it back at the same time as the map change, we also have to go through the land development code and the zoning map and layer on another layer of specificity in the zoning as to how do we implement that. So these are very regulated properties, and it gives the community a lot of opportunity to review within it. Also, anything that goes on within there will be limits within any of the character districts, and in order to get to the maximum of any kind of building height, floor area ratio, or anything, a maximum, and in almost all those districts would require a PD, which should mean coming back for a very site-specific development proposal. We think this is really critically important in the Johns Pass area, not only because it's a small area, it's mixed use, so everything affects everything else, but we're also very concerned about the quality of the roads that are already there, the underlying sewer and water utilities, and the condition that they're in. We know that a lot of geotesting would be required, and also the impact that certain construction types and practices might have upon the stability of the seawall. There's all kinds of issues that have to be considered in that area that is not as severe somewhere else. And so we need to make sure that the planning process responds to that. So the recommendation is from the staff that you adopt the policy change as suggested, and recommend. What you're doing here is not quasi-judicial. This is legislative. You get input from the community, and you know, you can mess with language a bit if you want to try to do that, and go back with a recommendation. What you're doing is making a legislative recommendation to the City Commission, who is the one who will make the final decision.
Well, that was thorough. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think it's my opinion, it's high time for that. I mean, Johns Pass Village has changed dramatically over the years. As a proud alumnus of Madeira Beach Middle School in 1980, I've been here a long time, seen a lot of changes, and it seems like the changes happen without any real reason, if you will, or any authority to do so. They just sort of happened, and it's nice to be able to put that into a package and see what that looks like going forward, and perhaps allow some of these owners within Johns Pass Village to make substantial improvements to the building that they may not have been able to do because of the floor area ratio restrictions and things like that. So I personally think it's a great idea. So do we need to call for public comment on this topic? Anyone like to speak to the matter at hand, please, from the public? Thank you, sir.
Chuck Dillon, Lillian Drive again. Thank you, Linda. I was part of that survey that we did, and it's good to see that something really came completely with it. And I think it's a very good idea, a good basis for getting this city back on track and figuring out what areas we need help with. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you.
Dustin O'Neill. I own a business at 140 Boardwalk Place West, on the pink area on the boardwalk there. I just want to say that I think it's very, very important that this happens quickly. I know that sometimes things can get hung up in bureaucracy, and it can take a little while to get things done. But as you all know, we're facing record years of hurricanes, more and more coming. Weather's getting more severe, so we don't really have the time to drag this out. I think it's very important that we take care of this as soon as possible. So all I have to say, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jason Dela Cruz. I own, again, on the boardwalk and on Pelican, so I'm caught in between both places. And I just want to kind of back up exactly what Justin said. This scares me to death. We could take the big one, and I actually own Don's Dock, which is the little tiny bait house underneath the boardwalk. And if a big one comes, I don't know what we're going to do with that. So, and we've been there since 1946. So, I mean, if you look back at that timeline, we really have been there a long time. I think actually on the historical register for the city. So if we can do something to protect that place, I think that'd be really useful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. Good enough? Any more? Thank you. Oh, sir, one more?
Greg Sorrell, Johns Pass Ave. I've heard a lot about the traffic and what we're looking at as far as Gulf Boulevard is concerned, but it appears that 150th tends to be the choke point coming into Madeira. So is anything being done as far as that's concerned? Because it's not a lot of room to expand or do much there. So I think that's probably going to be a problem before Gulf Boulevard becomes a problem as far as traffic. So.
Okay. It's not a point where we can engage.
No, I'm not asking for engagement. I'm just asking if that's being considered. I haven't heard anything about 150th. I've just heard about Gulf Boulevard. So I'm just asking if that's being considered with all the development and that type of thing.
Perfect. Thanks. If you want to address that, I'm happy to have you do so.
There's a lot of development approved along 150 because of the property out at Holiday Isle and the additional hotels and condominiums that were approved as part of the town center. And each time a proposal was made, they had to include a traffic engineering, a detailed report that they negotiated the methodology with FDOT because it's their roadway. And each of those, and it was cumulative. So, if you got approved for Holiday Isle and then you came in with Town Center, then the Town Center had to include what Holiday Isle impact would be. So they have engineering reports, and they've been making changes along 150th for that reason. Those are why those changes were being made, because the developers had to make the roadway improvements. Most of those improvements are made, and technically FDOT finds that it meets capacity at this time. And so they continue to study it every year as to what the impacts are, and each time any development comes in, we have to go back through a process with them, and we're always in conversations with them talking about the very options for things like lights and where it's appropriate to, left turns and things like. It's very difficult to get off and on 150th. We continue to work on that, but the city itself doesn't have any authority to plan something new along there. All we can do is not develop along there if it goes over the impact. We don't really have any new development along there planned that hasn't already been approved. So it's not part of this planning process right now.
No, but you understand how
it's sure.
Come through that way to get to Gulf Boulevard. So
right. Yeah.
That was my concern. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any more from the public? I'll say the public comments are closed on this matter at this time. Thank you for everyone for your contributions. To my Planning Commission members, what say you?
I have a few questions. Linda, that was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
My questions would be, the activity center seems to be much more than just Johns Pass Village. It seems a bit broader than that. I like how it's all broken down into the districts. I don't know if there's a purpose that it's as large as it is, but I guess my biggest concern would be about density. You have to be able to rebuild what's there because I think the term was used earlier with the Schooner presentation, legally non-conforming. Are those structures currently legally non-conforming, and would that make them be able to be rebuilt without going through this process?
They are legal, almost. I think probably it's all legal. So the city has not always done its own review. We contracted that out to Treasure Island and to the county for a long time. So things were built under review and with permission that did not necessarily meet the city's code. And then some of it was built long before we had codes in place. There's still some buildings down there that are from the 20s. And we didn't have really a full zoning code in place until 64. So almost everything's legal, non-conforming. And we do have provisions in our code that allow things to build back as those two redevelopment, but you'll remember it says in there that they can build back, but they have to meet the floodplain and the building code and the front setback. Our front setback, heaven help us, is really not urban. It's very suburban, and it would prevent you using the property at all. So we've got to fix that. You have to have development standards that suit the type of development that would be building back and full use of those properties. But in order to support that and to be consistent with the county's rule, we need to have a land use plan that whether they could build back or not, we have to have a land use plan that allows them to build back legally with their floor area ratio and their density. Otherwise, they remain non-conforming, and we're supposed to eliminate non-conformities from our code, and that still leaves us inconsistent with the county's rule and their intent, and with the state law for land use and zoning.
Okay.
Some of it couldn't be built back, because really once you've put in the for instance, with height, it says you can rebuild back to the same height, but what if now you have to put all your parking underneath the building or things like that, or you can't build any longer on the ground if it's residential, and you have some residential down there, now you've lost it, because we cannot violate building code or floodplain, things like that.
That addresses my question. But what about the other side? By changing the FAR, does that change the density, and how does that impact the city and the local community?
Right. The floor area ratio does not necessarily impact the density, because you typically can't get both floor area ratio and density if you've got a limitation on one or the other. I mean, you can't get full floor area ratio if by doing that it leads you to more density. So both of them are limiting. In the case of the density, there's what we're proposing does allow, especially for tourist support, because the comp plan says we're supposed to recognize it as a tourist area and provide for tourist accommodations. So we were proposing putting rooms down there where there's not a lot of rooms right in the village. Some of that's just recognizing the bigger condo type development, but where there's rooms in the village, the intent would be to put the tourists where they're parking, so that they're, where they're going, and tying it together so that we've got an enhanced trolley system and an enhanced wayfinding to get people moving around by pedestrian means or trolleys, and bicycles and scooters and things that provide non-automobile traffic, so they don't have to stay outside the area and keep coming in every day. But yes, that does increase the actual density of the pass, potentially, yes.
Yeah, you had a graph I was trying to follow, and I didn't really absorb everything there. That's the one.
Yeah.
That, how it really impacts, I guess, the residential around Johns Pass.
Right.
That's my concern.
I think if you look at what they propose which has been proposed, the activity center, the dark blue stuff, that's sort of a tapering effect, right, out from the center of Johns Pass. A lot of those buildings, what you saw along the Gulf Boulevard corridor, are already relatively new. You got the Madeira Bay projects, the townhomes, the Fish House, and the two Madeira Bay phases on that side. Across the street, you've got Barefoot Beach Resort. You've got Commodore Beach Club. You've got some large buildings, and as you approach the pass, you've got Madeira Norte and things like that. I don't see where those buildings are necessarily ripe for redevelopment, where they would have a tremendous effect. You might have a couple little spot infills residential zoning that might have a moderate effect or minor effect on the density or intensity of the use, but it would be a really difficult assemblage process, I think, to make any real impact on the intensity of the use just based on what's there. Yeah, if you look at the navy blue stuff off 131st there, that horseshoe shaped on the east side, that's all Madeira Bay stuff. That's all newish, right? And then across the street is Barefoot Beach Resort, Commodore Beach Club, a lot of those along there. And then as you come to the south, you're looking at all the Lost, Crimson and all the ones that are right on the beach. The only one that's the older building that's been there forever is the Shoreline. Not Shoreline. What's the one I'm thinking of? It's got the little sunset on the side. You know what I'm talking about. But that's the only one that's really kind of an older building that could be affected, I guess. But it's all condos, so it's highly unlikely, I think, that it would affect the intensity or density there in any large way. Just my
Most
opinion.
directly affected would be along 129th Avenue, the lower intensity development out
Right,
there.
getting back into that neighborhood.
Yeah, the neighborhood on the other side of the
That's what I'm
townhouses.
speaking to, really.
Right,
I'm just trying to
exactly.
figure out,
Mhm.
just wrap my head around it, that's all.
Okay. Any more comments, questions for Linda, or discussion you want to make on this, or someone want to bring forward a motion? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone?
Well, tonight, the motion would be to be able to accept the policy changes of 4.0 future land use elements that are recommended by the staff. Would that be the correct motion?
Correct. Just the text change to policy 1.1.2 and the future land use element.
Okay, so for clarity, the motion would be, are you making that motion?
Yes.
To accept the changes as proposed to land use regulation 1.1.2 as presented by the city. Do I have a second for that?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on the topic? All right, let's call the vote, please.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Lasso?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly?
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff?
Yes.
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Motion carries. Yes, thank you. Okay, the last item up for new business, TCH 2021-11, amendment to Chapter 94 floodplain management regarding manufactured homes and recreational vehicles.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we just recently came to you with updates to the floodplain ordinance, then we had to bring back the updates to the section of the code addressing the building codes as it related to the floodplain ordinance, and then just as we were about to undertake all those in the hearing process, the federal government let everybody know, let all the states know that if the local plans did not also specifically prohibit mobile homes, then they were not consistent with FEMA's policy, no matter what else we'd already done. There wasn't time to go back and change all those at the time. The poor folks at the state were in a bit of a frenzy because they were worried we'd end up adopting something that didn't leave us compliant with FEMA, but I just said we were okay because we didn't have our big cycle visit coming between then and now. So we've brought back the language. The deal in the past had been that our plan stated you couldn't have a mobile home unless it was in a mobile home park, and we didn't have mobile home parks, so we de facto didn't allow mobile homes. They said that wasn't clear enough. Now you have to actually prohibit it. They gave us the language they wanted to see, and that's what's in front of you today.
Well, that should make it rather easy, shouldn't it? Okay, do you have any public comment on the matter? You cleared the room with that one. Well done, well done. Thank you. Oh, you do? Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
You almost escaped me out the door. I've not been to a planning commission meeting before, and one of the things, and I have watched them on television, but staff recommends, do you guys ever really question the staff or go over that what they recommend is actually right or thorough? no offense, but
No,
I mean, the Schooner thing is a perfect example, because that just kind of got, I know it's been through here a number of times, but it just seems like a lot of stuff just gets rubber stamped here.
Yep. Should I?
So that's
Thank you.
That's my comment.
Thank you for your comments. Point taken. Thank you. Okay. Public commentary on that topic is now closed. Anyone on the board have any comments or would like to make a motion? Anyone?
I'll make a motion. That we approve TCH 2021-11 with staff recommended amendments.
I will second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from anyone on the planning board? Seeing none, I'd like to call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly?
Yes.
Commissioner Latzo?
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff?
Yes.
Thank you. Carries 5-0.
Motion passes. Thank
Chairman?
you, ladies and gentlemen.
Chairman, before you gavel, I have an additional item.
Yeah, we're not done yet.
Okay.
I got like 6 more things here. We got to go through
Okay.
numbers
All right.
on here, right? So item number 6, old business. Do we have any old business to tend to?
No.
Seeing none, any administrative or staff presentations at this point?
No.
Thank you. Any discussion by the Planning Commission? Mr. Kerr?
That would be it. On the meeting of August 2nd, I abstained from a vote, and it's been brought to my attention that I must file Form 8B with the program coordinator. And the vote was on TCH 2021-06, text change to Chapter 14, Buildings and Building Regulations by the City Code or Ordinance to provide consistency with and support of the provisions of Chapter 94, Floodplain Management of the City Code. During our discussion, Director Linda Portel stated that the real, quote, the real problem comes in when people try to enclose their garage and turn it into another room, a rec room, or something else downstairs, and they are air conditioning it. That's a violation of the floodplain ordinance here and locally, and the federal policies through FEMA. At that time of the vote, I was scheduled to meet with the special magistrate on August 23rd, 21 days later, to request a variance to convert my existing garage in the living space and air condition this space. I felt that my vote on the motion could be perceived as an ethics violation, so I abstained from the vote. And I wanted to put this into the record.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Trask, any further commentary on that? Anything further we need to do?
No, you don't need to do anything. Mr. Kerr just had an obligation to disclose it either at that meeting or the next following meeting.
Mm-hmm.
He's done that. He's going to fill out the form and complete it and provide it to staff for filing. Just remind every one of you that if you do have to abstain from voting, you will be filling out that form. You have to fill it out within 10 days of the date of the hearing or prior to the hearing.
Okay.
This one's going to be filed a little bit late, but still it's being filed. So
Okay.
just remind you.
As a matter of practice, it would be best to bring that before the matter at hand, right? Before the meeting, if at all possible.
Yes, at the beginning of that particular agenda item where you believe that you have a conflict.
Okay.
And obviously, you can always call the city attorney's office, me, or any one of the other attorneys in my office. There's 8 of us. You can ask that question ahead of time, so how you need to actually do that if you feel that there is possible conflict.
Yeah, as I recall that evening, we had a couple of abstentions that got a little bit confusing. I'm glad we brought that up. Thank you, Mr. Kerr, for bringing that into focus for us and reading it into the record, and it'll be included. Any other planning commission discussion, general discussion from anyone on the panel? I would like to comment that I appreciate the efforts that you guys go through cleaning up all the things that you have found. I really appreciate it. The work you do is often thankless, but thank you. And I know it's problematic going in and refitting everything. It's, you know, like rebuilding an old car, right, with parts that you can't source anymore. So as a resident, I thank you for what you're doing to make our city a better place. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Second that.
Before you adjourn, because I know you're leaning up towards that.
I am.
I just wanted to have 2 minutes of your time. Doing your civic duty, and you guys are really step out. You wasted 3 hours of your life here today, and
wasted.
but it's not a waste in my mind or the city's mind. I just want to let you know how much we appreciate. I know 2 of you are new members, and thank you for stepping up to the plate and really taking care of a very important function. You know, this function comes in under state law, and obviously it's part of our city code. So I wanted to thank you, because I probably won't get an opportunity to do this in the future, but you guys do a great job. I know the staff, I appreciate the accolades you give them, but I want to give you all some accolades, because you really are doing this for the goodness of your heart, and it's well appreciated by myself and the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Very kind of you to say. Okay, our next meeting scheduled for Monday, January 10, 6 p.m. Sir? Yes, sir, of course, sorry.
Hi, everybody. This is completely off the record. I just would like to get a feel back. I am a fly fisherman, and I tie flies on this as a hobby, so on and so forth. We have a meeting every Wednesday night, and that's what we do. About 2 months ago, I brought it up to the head honcho there. I said, being that I am from up north, you know, once a year they have a fly tying convention. They have it in Jersey, they have it in New York, they have it in Pennsylvania, they have it in Colorado. It's usually anywhere from 2 to 4 days. I said, is there one here in Florida? He said, not to my knowledge. I said, could you check on that? He did. He came back to me, he said, no. So a little time went by, and I said, you know what? I said, let me see if I can put this together. So I asked John, and I said, John, the mayor, I said, what do you think about, we have the kingfishing tournament, which is a success. It brings a lot of revenue in. It's great for the town, and I love it. So anyway, he said, go for it. So I asked my group again. They asked me if I would ask you people, because before I start this in motion and waste other people's time, including my own, because it's for nothing, what the consensus would be with the planning board. So I'm putting that out to you tonight. Wait a minute, it's not in stone. I know I have to do and go through the, you know, prepared how, what, where, so on and so forth. But I just wanted to run that by you if I could.
I think it'd be great. I don't know that we have anything at all, frankly, to do with that. That would be more of a city commission action if you were getting a special use permit for the park or something to that effect. Yeah, that would be a city commission function. No, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Nope. We're land use and
Gotcha.
Pretty much end of the
But
line.
I didn't know that, so.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I wanted to.
Fair question. I think it's a great idea, though.
I'm trying to, do everything.
Well, you're the one that's trying to do everything right. No, I appreciate that. No, that would be a commission.
That is a very sarcastic laugh. Holy mackerel.
All right, so next meeting, January 10, 2022, at this location at 6 p.m. I have informational materials. What is that about? Does that mean anything to you? It says informational materials on my agenda. Think we've gotten all of our informational materials.
Nothing new.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude this meeting and adjourn. Thank you all. Good times.